Hey, everybody. It is Wednesday, and we are here live. Christy and Jared.
Welcome back to the show.
We had trouble last week. We wanted to bring you an incredible interview with Paul, who is the discoverer of the sunken city off of Cuba. Many people have heard of it. If you Google it, there's going to be a couple things that you're going to find. You're going to find an ancient origin story, but you're not going to really find anything about the sunken city. Not really. And Paul graciously agreed to interview with us. So we have an incredible audio with some photos to do today.
Yeah, we do. But before we get into it, though, we need to talk about Belize.
We have an expedition coming up, and we really are excited about this. We want to invite everyone. We are going to Belize for 10 days, 9 nights. It's on the archeox.com website under expeditions. You are absolutely thoroughly invited to join us.
Yes. So it's 10 days, 9 nights. We leave May 30th.
Yes.
And we fly into Belize City, and then we head down south to Punta Gorda. We get to do all kinds of neat things. There will be a cave tour. We'll visit some ruins, some ArcheoX ruins that we've been working on.
Yeah. And those ruins, I mean, not that she's understating the Lord of the Rings size carved out mountain that you're going to go to, which is also a cave.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I know why Christy leads with it all the time because it is super cool. But
because you step into it and you're like, I'm not on the planet anymore.
Yeah,
that's what it feels like. I'm not on the planet anymore.
Yeah, that's actually true. So this isn't just a simple cave. It's not pulling off the side of the road. It is a hike into the mountains. Mm-hmm. It is an adventure. It's something that many people connect. You couldn't just go to Belize and get to it because of our connections, because of ArcheoX, because of what we've done. That's why we're able to bring this to you. So the cave is something really special, but it's surrounded by Mayan ruins, and we are going to be going to some of those ruins, including a place that we're working at, ArcheoX works at, and we get to bring you some actual live site that is being functionally, we're going to talk about it when we're there and what we're doing there, but also the Lubantoon site of the Mitchell Hedges crystal skull is within about 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. We're going to take you to that site also.
It's speaking of ruins. I don't think that we can actually continue the podcast without talking about Egypt.
No.
There's been a recent, so can I just report on the Daily Mail? I'll
Please.
Report on the report.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start at the top. Scientists on a mission to prove a vast city sits more than 4,000 feet below Egypt's Giza pyramids have released a new analysis that they say proves the findings to be true. Last week, a team in Italy presented bombshell research that claimed to have discovered multi-thousand-foot tall wells and chambers under the Khafre. Is that how you say it?
Yeah. Pretty close. We're English.
I'm not convinced.
We're not
English.
We're English. Sorry. Hey, look, we're not native Egyptians.
We're English.
We're not from Egypt.
No, we're not English.
We can't do it in Arabic or whatever other languages that the pyramids get credit for. So, hey, one of the 3 great pyramids, or of all the yeah, go for it.
Okay, so anyways, if true, it would turn Egyptian and human history on its head. That's true. So what they're saying is basically that they found all of these structures underneath the pyramids. The wells and chambers were identified sending high-frequency electromagnetic waves into the subsurface, and the way the signals bounced back allowed researchers to map the structures under the pyramids.
Yeah. So for years, I've been years. I can't believe I'm saying that. Okay.
We just get older.
For years, let me pull up my wheelchair and talk to you guys.
He did die. So, I mean, he could be, a few times. He died a few times. 7 to be exact.
My death promoter here, Christy, can confirm that I was dead 7 times from a cardiac arrest.
I'm not just promoting his death. I'm also promoting the recovery of his memory, because his memory is gone. And then a few days, 4 days leading up to your death. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
He doesn't remember anything. And so I think that we could do some I don't know, hypnosis or
other things.
Kundalini breath work, something like that to kind of recover those things. Eventually we're going to have time for that.
We're going to work out the chemistry of it.
Yeah.
For those wondering.
Yeah. One day.
And we're going to jumpstart it, because I did delete the experience itself. Everyone asks, is what did you see when you were dead? But we're going to stick on this on the Khafre pyramid, which is fascinating in that if the reports of the imaging that they've done that are underground. We're talking about 4,000 feet below the surface, 2,000 feet to 4,000 feet. They found not only columns, what could be reservoirs, which could be chambers, which could be, by chambers I mean actual constructed large spaces. And what's important about this is, for years I've been talking about the foundations of these ancient megalithic constructions. So there's the dynastic work. Egyptians have done it, Mayans have done it, Aztecs. But I'm talking about these prehistory societies that are over 5,000 to 10,000 years old, that used 1,000 and 3,000 ton stones. And not only that, it's not just the size, it's the precision and the locations on ley lines, the locations on all the energy, what would be a natural energy grid for the planet. And so what these constructions are, Christopher Dunn, who Lost Ancient Technologies of Egypt, just came out prior to this new article about this is a machine. And he wrote on this, and we all know that it wasn't just a big dynastic pyramid for a burial. Yeah, they used it as a burial, but I don't know, it's like using a space shuttle as maybe a taco truck.
Okay, so something also to be noted is that they believe that these structures are 38,000 years old, and the pyramids were built 4,500 years ago.
Right.
So,
I don't think that's entirely. So some of the stones, like the blocking. So we're going to take everyone there. So we're asking you to come to Belize with us and come to the ArchaeoX website, look for our expedition that's coming up, sign up, please, and come with us at the end of May and June. But Egypt is also on the list of where we're going to go. Mm-hmm. And one of the places we're going to go, of course, is the plateau. And in the ground around the Great Pyramid, you can see massive megalithic blocking in the ground. So they clearly built the pyramid on megalithic structure, but the pyramid itself, some of the casing stones are still left. Not the outer casing, but the megalithic blocking. It appears it has the same nubbing you see in Sacsayhuaman, or it has that same look to it. So whoever came 5,000 years ago and said, let's use this construction, they used
was already there.
Some of it was, or a lot of it, and then they, and then of course it got deconstructed dynastically in the last 600 years. It was used for palaces and buildings and churches and Islamic temples. So they've reused a lot of the block that's there, but it shows sign of very advanced ancient work. This article is super important because it talks about what's below ground, but one of the things that's most important is the construction of the foundation of these. Isn't just that it's solid. I think it really indicates that these are constructions that were meant to integrate with the earth itself. So if we would stop looking for, I'm not saying we shouldn't look for Tutankhamun. I just think that the construction of the foundations themselves, the walls that these megalithic blocks sit on, show signs of technology that, even though we might just see a compaction of a standard soil, I think we're going to find that the soils that are built up, or the sands, the crystal, whatever's in the crystals of the sand, all of it is intentional. And we don't look for it that way. We think, oh, it's just built on a hard surface. I don't think it's that simple.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just think
so. How do you think? How do you feel like so we're talking about all of this ancient technology, and we know that there are things that we are capable of as humans, right? Whether it's second sight or telekinesis or whatever. So we know that there's all these lost abilities that we're not in tune with, right? Do you feel like that the pyramids have some sort of a connection to that?
Yeah, if we could reconnect these systems or mimic them and then rebuild them on open land, and it doesn't have to be a giant pyramid, but if we could mimic, like if they're on a ley line, let's pick another ley line, and if they're in line with something else, I don't think it's the number of constructions. I think it's the material, and I think it's because this machine, what these pyramids really are, these ancient machines. We may not have been designed to integrate with you and I. They may have been designed to integrate with other machines, and either project, or maybe they were an energy gathering or redirecting system for other machines that we were connected to. Or maybe we could, if we were more, like you said, consciously connected, maybe if you and I were techs, we'd walk up to a machine like that and go, we just look at it, we'd know, we'd be able to sense and feel. We'd not just sense maybe it's just that. Yeah, we'd be able to use it. We'd be able to just look at it and go, oh, this, we need to tweak this or that or something. And so whatever dials or knobs or layers that were maybe made out of a composite material, they dusted and went away. So whatever the functionality was, or if it was on if it was on a spintronics, if it was on a nano, it was just a very thin layer, and it may have looked solid and may have dusted and gone away, but it may have had a function when it would connect with those frequencies or energies that the pyramid was gathering or pulling from the earth.
So we've got the pyramids, and then you have places like Stonehenge, right?
Yeah.
And so there's all of this speculation around the connection to the stars and astrology. And portals, and there's that group in like the late 70s or whatever, those teenagers that went to Stonehenge and disappeared.
Yeah. So maybe. So for everyone listening, on Not Aliens, I did a short documentary about well, it's not short, it's like 50 minutes, about, call it TerraCore, and one of the sites I like to tell everyone about is Stonehenge. And so what a lot of people don't know is Stonehenge was built by archaeologists. They found, yeah. So
we been fooled? Stop it. Did you just ruin everything for me? So these people didn't disappear? They didn't go through a portal? Is that what you're saying? I was really excited about that.
Yes, they jumped through a portal.
Damn.
No, they may have jumped through a portal. Here's the thing. Stonehenge in its rebuilding in the 50s. So I have
because some of them fell, right? So they had to be rebuilt, but they were rebuilt. They weren't built. They were rebuilt.
Well, so here's what's really, so there's a lot of stuff out there. Hugh Newman, David Hatcher Childress has done a lot of work on this. Hi guys. And for what they've done, one of the things that is a problem with the rebuild of Stonehenge, and this is a great example. It's like, you've seen it and you're like, oh, Stonehenge. The thing is that when they rebuilt it in the 50s, one of the things that they just sort of left out is that there are etchings. The oldest etchings of this site are from like the 1700s. And so I like to look at those and go, okay, well, how did it look when they found it, before they rebuilt it? However, here's the thing. In the ground, which no one talks about, don't be mad about this.
You're gonna ruin it for me.
No, I'm gonna add more mystery.
I need the truth. It's fine. We need the truth. This is what we need, right? The truth.
Okay, so Stonehenge.
How do you know it's the truth?
By the way, everyone, thank you for joining us. One of the problems is that they left megalithic blocks underground that were once part of the structure. So I think
why aren't we digging?
There's a question. Why is Göbekli Tepe not dug?
Yeah, why are we delaying that for 150 years? That to me is complete. Let's try to hide this from the public.
Right. So if we're doing that to Göbekli, and that's been dug at for a while before Klaus Schmidt died, and now you have Stonehenge where they selectively chose they call them the Sile stones. So some of the oldest stuff. So some of Stonehenge is contemporary. Some of it was built by people.
I'm so disappointed.
We
probably should have had this conversation before we hopped on here live. Don't you
prefer the being shocked live?
This is the shock factor.
So look, here's the added mystery. There are giant megalithic blocks that they chose not to include in the rebuild of what is a stone circle, but the Sile stones, they took a core sample in the 50s, which was found in Texas because it was gifted to someone. So what's important about this is that some of the stones of Stonehenge, and I include this in the documentary, and you can find the old black and white photos, they have nubs. It's very clear that the oldest original stones of Stonehenge are clearly from something much more advanced. And if they're made out of Sile stone, they're called the Sile stones, but they're made out of silicrete. Silicrete is almost literally indestructible. Silicrete, it's insane. So they're like, oh, they found silicrete up north and they just dragged them down. No. They have to have something that cuts silicrete. Two, they're so weathered. There's no way that the stones of Stonehenge would be that weathered if they're not truly, truly ancient.
Okay. So then they are ancient.
Oh, yeah.
How ancient do you think they are?
Tens of thousands of years.
Okay, stop it. So did the people really disappear? Do you think they went through a portal?
So
they did, didn't they?
So it's possible
they did.
that they actually disappeared.
They disappeared. They're gone. They were never seen. It was like, what, 1979? This group of teenagers went to Stonehenge and they were having like some kind of seance or something. And all of a sudden, other people around reported like seeing a bright light or I don't know, some kind of flash or something happen around Stonehenge. I'm pretty sure it was 1979. Don't hold me to that, okay? I'm throwing it out there.
So it's possible not only people have accidentally activated the machines or whatever.
Yeah.
And here's the thing.
And they're gone now forever. They're in another dimension.
But maybe the reason they disappeared, by the way, is because the construction itself of Stonehenge, that it's in a circle, may not at all have been the original constructed system. So by putting those stones in that circle, it created this malfunction or misfunction.
Oh my God. What if they were transported into like some other dark dimension or some,
Yeah.
not if the family, what, I'm sorry, but like, that's probably not the case.
They went to a happier place.
They went to a happy place. But really though, like if that was the case, then if it's like tinkering with shit you don't need to tinker with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In the cosmos, like you don't want to get out there and start tinkering with stuff you don't know anything about, especially when it comes to like physics or quantum physics. So like, beware. What did Schrodinger say? He said it scared the shit out of him, and he wished he'd never looked behind the veil. Basically.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So Schrodinger basically said, "I wish I had nothing to do with it."
Yeah, he said that. So
yeah.
So what does that mean?
Well, and here's another problem. What if all megalithic advanced ancient ruins? What if by messing with them all along? Early on, let's just say that when they were abandoned 10,000 years ago, they had a function still, but 100,000 years ago, they had a different function, or 50,000 years ago, and 100,000 years ago. What if they were still more active in their original format? And as they digressed, the legends and myths around them changed based on the reaction of those machines and how they still function with the human mind.
That's good.
So,
that's a good theory.
And always changing our perception. And then changing our legends and our myths changed around how those machines would interact with the few people that were still maybe plugged in or still conscious, or how they still plugged into biosystems like fungal networks.
But Stonehenge is like a lunar event, though it's not like a solar event.
Now
so it
has
to be. Do you think it used to be a solar?
That's the thing. What if it wasn't a henge? It was just that's what they picked up the stones that were left of what was once a large megalithic advanced building, and then they made a henge because they're like they get circles.
That makes sense.
And here's the other thing. They knew how to make circles with domed. They knew how to make thatched roofs and stuff like that. We don't know if when they put them in the original circles, if that was actually an enclosed structure.
Maybe it was. Maybe it had a thatched roof on it.
Yeah. That would not have been an exterior building. It would have been an interior building.
I know. It's really hard to think about a society that's so far advanced that they could build like lathe type carvings, like lathe type precision, right? But then we've got these stones with thatched roofs. Does that make any sense?
No,
it doesn't make any sense.
No, you don't. And here again, Stonehenge is made out of silicrete. It's described as indestructible. So you have to cut an indestructible stone. It doesn't look all wavy. That takes time. That takes weathering. Against something like that would take great antiquity. So so the nubs and everything that are on it, they do not look not precision cut. They were precision cut. They were precision made. They put together. They were part of a larger construction or something that no longer existed. So when whoever found it made it into a henge, if we get carbon dates that say that this henge is, we already think that it's Göbekli Tepe is touted as being older, right? But Stonehenge itself is at least 5,000 to 8,000 years old in contemporary times. So that means they came across something that was already abandoned and then thought, we like circles.
The moon's a circle. Let's make it a circle.
That's actually really good logic. That's exactly what they would think. It's like, me hungry, circle, donut,
circle,
henge.
Yeah, make it.
Yeah,
me build.
It's hard.
No.
That means,
no, it was definitely more advanced than that. It had to have been.
No, originally, yes, but not for the people who came along 5,000, 6,000.
Afterwards, right.
Yeah,
right.
they're like...
And rebuilt it.
Yeah, after they banged a couple rocks, they're like, we could hunt more or we could make a circle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe it was like a circle of protection. Maybe they were being protected from...
Being abducted?
I don't know, because it seems to me like you go in the circle to get abducted.
This is if you guys needed a celestial target, we'll stand in the circle so you don't miss us.
That's basically it. I think it is a celestial target.
Why would you put a target on yourself? It's like we only throw the people in we don't like.
I know, it's because I feel like those people that just step into that are just like, nothing's really gonna happen, and then they're gone and they're like, well, hell, now we're gone.
There's a lot of things, again, as the technology changes. So if the Sile stones are connected to part of the earth, and if the earth has been terraformed and some of the stuff that it's connected to is connected to these Sile stones, and the Sile stones themselves are like a solid state hard drive. So if the Sile stone is actually a solid state hard drive that had function, and it would connect to either consciousness or to the ground or both, and fungal networks and tree networks and everything else. So those buildings could have easily connected. Yeah, what are you thinking?
Okay, so do you know the other day when we were talking about like nanotechnology in the future of taking like pieces of, you know, the road that's been busted up or, you know, stuff like that and crushing it up and rebuilding it into something else. And then maybe one day in the future, we can build it back the way that it was before.
Yeah.
What about places like that?
Exactly. So if we know they're like, hey, they drag these stones from X, Y, and Z place. The thing is that there's so many underground still that they just chose not to include in the rebuild.
Which is so crazy to me. It's like, why, what are we hiding? Which is basically it's the foundation of all of the things, of all of the research is turned into this, okay, something's not quite right here.
No.
And so we need to do a little more digging. We need to, why can't we dig below? Why are we putting off these sites for 150 years? Like, why are we putting these digs off? What are we trying to hide? We're doing this for future generations, but why? What's the point? Why?
Okay, so here's like a really low level 3D kind of very lowbrow answer. One is there are billions of dollars in universities that are tied up in degrees that are decades old and now centuries old, in institutions that say this is an A, this is a D for knowing this or knowing that. And so the hubris, honestly, that I think is involved in, if you have to rewrite that, you like, this is an epic miss. I mean, when you take this space shuttle and use it as a taco stand and you think it's always been a taco stand, when anyone can walk up and go, that's a space shuttle, it flies to space.
Yeah.
So when you look at Silestones and they've been dealing with all these, like, I mean, think about the number of museums that have humanity, you know, that have natural history. Yeah. Loincloth and banging rocks and sitting around a campfire.
Yeah. That's not us. We were way more advanced than that.
So
I don't know that were we ever really that primitive, do you think?
Oh,
for sure. 100%.
We're showing ourselves. I have to mix this. We're drinking while we do this. We're drinking.
It's been a long day.
We're drinking non-alcoholic beverages for all those that are listening. And I'm just mixing water. But here's the thing. Maybe those, again, it's not all of them, but maybe one of the explanations is that, hey, we aren't going to change the entire global collegiate system to change what is a 3 to, you know, which is now easily $250,000 to $350,000 degree, to change world history. And also, again,
that would cost too much.
And not picking any specific religion. However, if the world's older than 10,000 years or 5,000, in fact, let's just say this: the Hindu Vedic literatures and a lot of the Hinduism, all the books talk about millions of years of gods and humans.
Like there's human DNA and bones that are millions of years old.
Yeah,
that we find. So let's explain that, and that comes way before religion. What were those people doing?
By the way, what do you think? I mean, what do you think of religions? And I mean, do you ever have a hunch about a religion like we both grew up, we grew up Christian in very crazy, Christy grew up in an area where I feel like there's like a system, and I grew up super Catholic. But the thing is,
I didn't grow up in the area.
No, you didn't.
I was immersed into it in my early adult life. And then it was something I followed for years.
Did you ever, and this isn't relationship to our specific Judeo-Christian past, but I've never asked you this question. When was the first time you like had a hunch or an idea that it's a deeper system, or that it's something else, or that it's something
mission trips? Is when I started doing mission work. When I started doing mission work in Honduras, I just felt like the typical Christian Baptist way of delivering the message felt off in that sense to me. It just didn't resonate. It felt like we're doing these things to bring souls into the kingdom, you know, save souls. And that didn't resonate well with me. And then also sermons, like sitting in through sermons on Sunday mornings that I felt like didn't resonate. That it was like, okay, so we have this God who's unconditional love with these conditions, and there's only 10 of them in the book, but there's way more than that, we know. Right? So we have this unconditional God that has all these conditions. So to me, that's counterintuitive. So things started just kind of making me question, which is now I'm a spiritualist and don't really associate with religion, because one of the things that I learned was in my quest for knowledge and understanding of myself and spirituality and religion and all that good stuff, I learned that religion is relatively new compared to human antiquity. Like, we are way older than religion. So what were those people doing? You know,
Right.
the first people, what did they believe in? What were they doing? If we take Christianity and certain faiths, and it's like your entire life and being in existence revolves around this religion or this specific faith or denomination or whatever it is you believe in. Like, if you take your entire life and you wrap it all around religion, then you're missing a bigger picture.
Yeah.
You know, and so the more I started digging into myself and trying to understand myself, it really wasn't, it wasn't so much the literature I was reading or the documentaries or anything like that. It was something I felt inside myself. It was just, it didn't resonate with myself. And I think that we all have that ability to feel truth. If we're connected and we're in alignment with ourselves, then we can feel what's true and what's not. We don't need anybody to tell us or show us or cram anything down our throats or in our minds. We don't need to be programmed. We know what the truth is.
Yeah. What did anything then hit you as to be more true, or not a specific religion, but did you ever like, what are you thinking?
Yeah. That God, source, cosmic energy, whatever we want to call it, is in us all. It's inside us all. We don't have to meet these specific conditions. We don't have to go to confession. We don't have to even go into a building. Like, we can connect with source energy in our bed, in our floor, in our shower, in our living room. Putting our feet on the planet is the best way to do it, I feel like.
Okay.
I feel super connected. The best time for me is in the mornings, walking outside, planting my feet, and just feeling. Yeah. Just being present in that atmosphere, in that environment, and connecting with nature, because source energy runs through everything, plants, everything, the fungal network on the planet, the trees. It's studied and proven. Trees speak to each other. You have one tree on one side of a forest that's completely connected to another tree on another side of a forest. Yeah. It's communication, and that's intelligence. So obviously there's source running through all of us, and we don't need to look outside of us to connect to that. Yeah. It's inside of us. There's
so many layers to it. And I think that when you said about connecting, not to bring it full circle, but whether it's Stonehenge or whether it's the Giza Plateau, I don't think these constructions, these megalithic works, these ancient pre-advanced histories, I think there's design, not just that there's intelligent design around the idea of there being a complex plant or an amoeba or something. I think that these networks once connected to these constructions, and I don't think that our ability to do paranormal things or to do second sight or to do these synesthesias, I think it was all connected. So the find, like in Egypt, of these massive pillars and columns, it's not just that there's columns. I think that the more we study the foundations of megalithic constructions and more of these clearly advanced, technically built areas. So it doesn't have to be the construction itself. It could be miles around it. I think whatever's turned to dust and there's been accumulation. But I think if we dial back 100,000, 10,000 years, 50,000 years, 100,000 years, I think we're going to find that the layers of the earth that have been turned over time is going to yield some spintronics, which is the study of quantum computing and stuff like that. So it's like really tiny stuff. We build machines and have for almost 40 years now out of just single atoms. So we don't look at archaeology that way. We don't go like, let's go find something that's like 30 atoms in size. like, yeah, it just sounds hilarious, right?
It does. Yeah.
That's how, so everyone is probably really familiar. Many people are familiar with quantum computing. What you want to look up, if you want to see some cool ass articles about, to get your imagination going, about small quantum machines that make other machines that are 30, 40, 50, 80 atoms in size. So we're able to grab atoms, make a machine that then makes more little machines out of atoms that can then be Wi-Fi controlled in the human body.
In the human body?
We could do that in 2008.
Stop it.
In 2008.
How do I just now know this?
Because you've been busy. She's been busy. You're busy. And
We're
it's
all
like,
busy.
everybody wants a quantum computer to just make their game go faster. Nobody ever thinks that, oh, hey, in ancient antiquity, not only are they building big and precision, so again, we like to say that the Great Pyramid itself next to Khafre is 1/60th of a second off of north by south. 1/60th. Our best try at this is an observatory, I believe, in France. And I think it's like a couple minutes off.
So what does that mean for us? Like, what does that mean for what does that mean for current knowledge? How do we compute that in our brains? Like, how do we add up our history to that? How do we make it match? How do we put the pieces together?
So here's the cool thing is if you're doing yoga and you're doing meditation and you're eating healthy and you're changing yourself and you think like, what's the point? I want to live a little longer. I want to be a little healthier. But when you have mental clarity and you're like, oh, well, I wake up and I'm not tired. That's not the only reason. I think that when we're grounding to the earth, when we're hitting we're hitting ancient technologies that are no longer connected to the ancient devices that they were connected to. We get a sense. It's like running your feet across carpet and we get a static charge and we get a shock. That's great.
Do you think some of that's like genetic memory?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what happens though is that we have the thought and we're like,
oh, Starbucks sounds good.
Yeah. And then, well, there's that.
Distracted. Squirrel.
Ooh.
Shiny.
I like that. One, we get distracted, but also based on our family of origin, we misplace why we have these experiences, or we've discovered a new experience. We've gone out of our family of origin. We've gone out of our religious, our background, our belief system. We've gone into a new belief system. So we now believe in yoga, or we believe in a new spiritual system, or we're open to it. And suddenly we're putting meaning behind methodologies that are only hundreds or thousands of years old when we have tens of millions of years of human history. And so we're still clouding our judgment. I'm not saying we're not having a real experience.
We're being programmed.
Well, but we're being programmed in a new way, which is helping us get out of an old way. But that new way doesn't mean that it's any less of a problem for us to see clearly.
So how do we fix it?
I think part of it.
How do we fix it in the future? Like, how do we? So we have this society that's driven by programming and conditioning and childhood trauma and ancestral DNA and just like all this shit mixed up, and we're so confused, right? We're so confused. And and not only that, we've been taught growing up, we've been taught in school, like traditional schools teach you false history, and maybe they don't know they're teaching false history. I used to be a teacher. If I were a history teacher, I would have been teaching false history. There was actually a time in my church I was teaching false history. So I feel like there's all of this false history that we because when you're born, and we're born, obviously, who said it? We're born as a society with amnesia, or a race with amnesia.
Graham Hancock.
Hancock said, okay, so we're a race.
Species with amnesia.
Amnesia. Which is true. Like, we're born and we don't remember where we came from, or what most of us don't, or some of us do when we're children, and then we forget, like kids that can remember their past lives or things like that. Questionable, but that it's a thing. So you've got these things, but we're born and we don't remember where we came from or how we got here or any of these things. We're just born from the womb, and then we're born into whatever society or culture that is going to program us and condition us the way that, they believe. And so whether you're Hindu or Buddhist or Christian or Catholic.
Yeah.
You're born believing whatever it is that you're just, it's not that it's force fed. It's just, it's societal conditioning.
Yeah.
And then you go to school and you're in these institutions who are reaffirming all of these things, right? And you're being taught and fed all of this history that actually isn't true, because the history books, if we're being honest, well, what is it like? It's written by the victors. The people that win the wars make the history. The people that win the wars go and wipe out all of the other civilizations and probably store their text somewhere. They probably don't burn it, but some of it's probably been burned. But they blow up these societies. What are you when you're not a winner? Not a loser, but when you lose a war, what is it called? It's been a long day.
The defeated? I don't know. The loser.
The losers of the war. their society is just broken and burned and lost. And so the history books are written by the victors. Well, they can write it any way they want. They can write whatever stories they want to be true, and then that's what we're fed. We go to school and we're hearing all of these histories that are just like half truths. But then you get out into the world and you start digging, and then it's like, oh,
yeah,
wait a minute.
And all of it, I think
everything is a lie.
One of the things is you started with the question of how do we figure it out?
Yeah.
I think one of the ways to do it is to join ArchaeoX in Egypt and Peru and in Belize. Here's the thing. I do think there's something to genetic memory, and there's something about collective. So when you have like-minded people,
that's it.
So there's that. However, we're not just talking about agreement. We're talking about, I think that when you go to these places, and we do work in these places, but we also go to these places, and the reason we go is that there's something about some of us can describe it as like an energetic thing, or a download, or there's a lot of different things that happen when you go to these places. Something feels different. But when you go with people that are also curious, it doesn't matter what your background is. It matters that when you go to these places, you're there, and it helps, I think, to be with people who are open or have a curiosity to be open. When you go and you experience that together, which is one of the things we're hoping to do whenever, whoever would like to join us in Belize and in the future, Peru and Egypt, it's just look at archaeox.com. But I think it's very important to activate not only a genetic memory, or if you're having an unconscious connection to the collective human consciousness, when you do get a download, and what Christy, you said it earlier about having a past life, having like you have a memory of a life you lived, but it may not be that. It may be a download of someone else's life because you unscrambled.
It could be. It's like when you, and I'm not just saying women, but as a woman who spends a lot of time solo traveling, it's like you just, when you're walking down the street and, Google says, take this turn, and you look and it's dark and sketchy and you get that feeling on the inside, like, probably shouldn't take that road. That to me is a little bit of common sense, but also when you get that feeling on the inside, like you're being watched or followed, or like, it's kind of, it's like it feels like genetic memory almost, like, or downloaded memory. Like, it's like my sisters are telling me,
or second sight,
don't go down that road. Don't take that alley. Don't turn left here. Don't go in the store. Like just that feeling that you get, it's almost just like it's an undeniable call to action. Like either do or don't do this. And you can't really deny it when you feel it and you don't know where it's coming from. To me, I'm always like genetic memory.
We'll see, partially there's like stored genetic memory, but I think that's
collective consciousness.
But I think that's like a perfect example of actually bringing into consciousness that actual collective consciousness that's alive and working functionally now.
And growing, don't you feel that way? Don't you feel like it's currently the system of evolution that we're living in is just becoming more and more evolved, and this new generation of kids are questioning, and it seems that they're seeking a little bit more. It's like they're I think that you've got the internet, right, which a lot of this gender, like like our kids, we're born into like after the internet, and so they don't even know what it's like to be disconnected, or like, throw rocks in a creek, or, you know what I mean? Like use sidewalk chalk, like, I mean, they do. We taught them the right way, but
yeah, that's true.
But for the most part, like a lot of these kids are just so disconnected, and they're plugged in, and they get validation and confirmation and affirmation and all this stuff like through social media, and they don't know what it's like to not have those things. And so I think that like moving forward, these kids are looking for connection because they naturally, innately feel a little more disconnected than we did growing up.
That's true.
I think they feel as it's an inauthentic connection. Basically, it's like you're building relationships. Yeah, you can get on a game and you can build some actually like authentic relationships with people. But for the most part, I find that they have a hard time making eye contact, or, like carrying on a face-to-face conversation. Like they can't do it. They just don't know how, but they seek it. They want it. They want to understand more because they're searching for connection. They're just searching in the wrong way.
Yeah. But I think a lot of us to your point, a lot of people do this. They do it with spiritual systems. They do it with religious systems. They do it with intellectual systems. They do it with escaping in so many different ways, and so they're not activating that. And I think part of the ways, again, the foundation of all of this, part of it was your question about how do we reactivate it. Part of it is, I think, not just visiting some of these ancient sites, but to experience it. It's
collectively.
Collectively. And then as deep as you want to go down the rabbit hole individually or collectively, there's the breath work, there's the meditation, there's everything else. But all of it leads to, I think, a different place in your own memory and your own experience, because you're reactivating. It's not just like the sites. There's something about in your stored memory. Yeah, I do think that there's something that we can maybe collectively grasp at. And maybe we don't have an answer. Maybe we don't have exactly hey, I can see clearly this happened, 100 million years ago or 10,000 years ago. We might not know that, but I do think that part of it is experiencing these places. Part of it is eating good. Part of it is trying these practices.
It's all of the things.
Yeah.
It's all of the things like you've written about in your book. When you incorporate things like sound healing, and being near the water, listening to the water, the vibration and the frequency coming from the water is healing. Submersing yourself in the water, which I think is like cold water plunges have a huge effect on our body, but also just being in the water has an effect on our body. The vibration, the frequency coming from the water, especially if it's natural water, like mountain water, spring water,
healthy water that's not been put through a city sewer system.
Yeah, that kind of water. So when we start incorporating things like sound healing, whether that's like using bowls, the singing bowls. I don't know why the word wouldn't.
Sounding bowls?
Singing bowls.
Okay, singing bowls.
They're singing bowls.
Yes.
Yeah, singing bowls. So sound healing, or the
just
brain.
First word, second syllable.
Ting, 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 ting.
I think we're talking about tuning forks.
Tuning forks. That's it. What do we have for him, Johnny? I'm back. So tuning forks. So we have sound healing, and we have, all the things: yoga, meditation, breath work, plugging in, hugging trees. I'm not going to lie. I love hugging trees, and it's not because I want to save them all, but I really do. After you watch Lord of the Rings, it's like, how do you watch Lord of the Rings and then go cut down trees, and have a conscience doing it? It's like murdering your grandfather. You know what I mean?
Or great-great-grandfather.
Or great-great-great-great-great-great-great. Like, and they're super old and sweet, and they communicate smart things.
Yeah.
We can't just go chopping down all the trees.
Yeah, they're screaming.
Why don't we just run after Pando and start chopping shit down?
I think it's happened.
Oh no.
Not all of the time, but yeah, there's a thing. There's all the systems, from the frequency stuff, the sound, all of it are things that help us, but all of them are things where I think it's like banging on the blinky board. It's like we get a red light, we get a green light if we bang here or there.
Yep.
But nobody walks up and says, why are you banging on a control panel to a 747? And so, and you're like, well, because I get a green light. Well, it does a lot more than green lights, or red lights. But when we have all these systems and we do the sound things and we do, so our connection to where we are consciously, that amnesia part of it, it's like, it feels good. It's like we're connecting to something, or we see an electron exchange when we step on the earth, but we're not. If we look at these ancient megalithic constructions and we combine it with all the ways synesthesia and second sight and paranormal and all these and consciousness connect, it's like, hey, it's not too hard to paint. I know we're sitting behind a psychedelic sort of image.
We're traveling. We're always on the road.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that we combine all these systems and we get a very different picture. So I think as you add data or experiences, whether you're traveling to anywhere or with us on an expedition, I think that all that combined with wherever you're at is another tool in your arsenal to kind of wake up whether it's dreams or whether it's reality or your meditation.
Dreams.
These are all ways to activate that consciousness again. Yeah.
And it's also a practice.
Yeah.
Like, these things are a practice. We shared a meal with a very interesting guy just a few days ago, and he spoke about lucid dreaming. And so I think
Yeah.
that there are things that we can practice. There are things like one of the things that that I'm oddly capable of doing, and so is my father. We can dream, wake up from a dream, and then intentionally go back and pick up where we left off in a dream. I don't know a lot of people that can do that, and I can't do it all the time, but I can do it often. What?
Yeah. No, I think it's what? No, this is like crazy because my cousin can do this, but I have zero experience with what you can do, and it's
the hardest part about it is flying.
How?
I don't know why I struggle so hard flying in these dreams. It's like something's
like you
pulling
fall
me.
down?
No, it's like gravity is like trying to bring me back down to the earth, and I'm like, no. And I'll try to like fly over a power line and just barely get by. You know what I mean? It's the weirdest thing. I don't know.
Huh.
Dreams, they're weird. But to your point, I think that it's important to for us to wrap our minds around the possibility of how collective consciousness can awaken things inside us that may be dormant, like abilities that may be dormant, or decalcifying our pineal gland. There's certain things that we can do, foods that we can eat, like you were saying, our diet, our lifestyle, exercise, the way we plug into the planet, the way we connect to each other. All of these things connect in some way. We just haven't figured it out yet. But I mean, if you have,
hey, reach
please
out.
visit archeox.com, fill out a form, send us some information, and we'll contact you.
Yeah, we could have you on and we could talk. We did promise that we're going to talk. We're actually going to start releasing and playing for you. And now that it's minute 46, what we're going to do is share some of the Paul. I'm not saying right this minute, but the interview we did, no one has talked to anyone who's actually found the sunken city off of Cuba. This is a megalithic city. It's a megalithic find. It could have been 50,000 years ago when it was above and actually out of the water. So it's about 1,700 meters. It's about 2,300, 2,400 feet deep off the coast of Cuba. This is a significant find. It's rarely talked about. We are going to start it tonight. It's long, so we're going to start it, and please enjoy it, I think, but not now. I just thought I'd mention that this is the reason we were on tonight. We were going to talk. And for those of you who have hung on, and if you're listening in the future, thank you. But we should start it eventually. But for now,
we should. And so I think just to preface the recording, he was a super fascinating man, Paul Weinzweig. He discovered that he and his wife Paulina.
yeah,
it's very synchronicitous.
This is a
synchronicitous.
Yeah. It's cool.
Is that the right word? Synchronicitous?
There are some
synchronicitous.
There are some great parallels here.
Do you know when you say words sometimes and you're like, is that a word or did I just make that up? I feel like I just could have made that up. Is it a word?
It's kind of the pompous of love.
Anyways. Yeah. He was amazing. So she was part of the KGB.
Did you say KBJ?
KBG. KGB. Synchronicitous. Is it a word?
Synchronicitous?
Synchronicitous.
I think
like
it should
synchronicity?
Be. Yeah, but anyone has their Webster, pull it out while we're chatting, but we'll look into it and get back to you next week.
Yeah. I'm going to check that out. Anyways, he was amazing. His wife, she ran from the KGB, not BG, but GB.
not from Christy Bass.
It's been a really long day, week, and it's Wednesday. Yeah. Anyways, so they literally were like running from them to get on a plane down. Like she's carrying her 2 kids. Anyways,
that's in the interview.
It's in the interview. It's amazing. So you've got to hear it.
So we're going to share that with you. What do you think?
Now would be great.
Okay.
Roll it.
Then we're going to do it.
The spring is in the air, so the Cardinals are back, so it makes me happy.
So you've been bird watching this morning?
Yeah, I do it every morning, but I had, for 4 months they disappeared. Who knows? Probably went to Florida. They won't go anymore after all these tariffs, I can tell you. By the way, I'd like to apologize for the electricity tariff that Ontario put on Minnesota today.
You know what?
25%.
Paul, in all fairness, we're going to leave the state anyway, so, there's one more thing
Okay,
Minnesota.
so it's not personal then.
No, it's not. And besides, I consider some of those birds that fly south to be very patriotic.
Well, we'll talk about that another time.
Well, this interview is going to get off to a great start.
Yeah, right.
So, first off, yeah, you're good with us recording this, correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
So we are,
we're really excited to have the opportunity to talk to you and to be able to share, your story with anyone who wants to listen.
Good. Yeah, I have lots of stories there, I'll tell you, that have both local and global significance. Do you want to? So you'll interrupt and ask questions or whatever, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, whenever you aren't giving off some more sage wisdom, we can jump around from questions to history to, I guess, some geopolitics.
Yeah, and this is really informal, and we can just chat like a normal conversation.
Okay, good. So I have a question about sequence. There's a lot of interesting backstory to the megalithic structures and the treasures that are involved. And the question of whether of how you want me to proceed. I mean, I could talk briefly about the expedition and then do the backstory. I could start with the backstory.
Oh, start with the backstory.
Yeah, let's start with the backstory.
Okay. Yeah, okay, that's really interesting.
Tell us about it.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
How did it happen? How did you get into it?
Well, quite by serendipity and accident. It all starts with my dear wife and partner, Polina Zalitsky. She was a student at the Odessa Marine University in Ukraine, and during the Soviet Stalinist regime. And there was another student she met there who was from Cuba. And she was immediately attracted to him because she thought this was very exotic and might get her out of a rather dreary period in Soviet and Russian history. Anyway, they got married, had a child, and they were sent to Cuba in 1968. The Soviets have been in Cuba, and then the Russians since the time of the Bolshevik just after the Bolshevik Revolution. They immediately moved into Cuba, saw a strategic geopolitical advantage being so close to Florida and the United States.
Sure.
So they had a huge presence in Cuba. And they were there under false agricultural worker program, but actually they had a huge nuclear submarine program in San Fuegos in the south. And these submarines were armed with nuclear weapons. And this was after the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, which brought the U.S. and the Soviets to a near nuclear war in October of 1962. Anyway, despite the U.S. assurances and the Soviet assurances, the Soviets were back in there. Anyway, so Polina and her husband Eduardo had another child, so they had two children. And at one point, Polina is seconded to the Soviet Marine military in San Fuegos because the previous translator was sent home or sent to jail or whatever. And so she had a job there to as a translator because she had learned Spanish in the interim. And she became increasingly paranoid, working under KGB auspices, and an attempted rape by one of her family friends who was her superior at this mission. And she decided she was going to try and escape at great risk to her life and her family, both at home in Ukraine and her children. She eventually managed to defect at a series of very traumatic and remarkable events, which are detailed, by the way, in her tremendous memoir called The Sea is Only Knee Deep, and it's co-written by myself. And she escaped and began, with her children, chased by the KGB on the tarmac in Newfoundland, carrying one of her young children in her arms and running across the tarmac to plead for amnesty and admittance to Canada. And the KGB were armed to the teeth, were after her, and she escaped, and she became the first Soviet person to escape with her children at Gander Airport in Newfoundland, and create what was called a hole in the Iron Curtain. It was reported in the International Tribune out of New York, and it was quite a story at the time. That was 1971.
Wow.
Okay? So Blaine and I met and married around 1986, 87. We were invited to the Soviet Union at a time of perestroika when they tried to take advantage of former Soviet scientists and engineers to help find a new direction to Russia and the Soviet Union, and that would help join it to the Western world. And Polina, they published one of my books on self-realization and psychology, and became a bestseller. I did a television series at their behest, and Polina brought a lot of Western, especially American companies to the Soviet Union, and including the #1 defense contractor in America. So it was quite a remarkable time. There were over 5 years, and then at which time the Soviet and Russian economy collapsed, and the place became quite chaotic, and we left. So in 1987, Polina and I and her mother were living in Victoria, British Columbia, on Vancouver Island.
Nice.
And Polina was tracking Cuba, events in Cuba, very closely. And what had happened from earlier last couple of years before 87 is that the Soviets, because their country was in dire straits, began to withdraw their support from Cuba. And Cuba started to initiate its own perestroika and launching a kind of rapprochement with the West. Polina saw this as an opportunity to bring her children back to Cuba to meet their father for the first time in 25 years.
Oh, wow. And to look for possibly some opportunities for some joint ventures. Okay, so
So Pauline and I went to Cuba, and we met with the Cuban military, and who were very interested, who had a project in mind, and had heard the project was rather remarkable, and it goes back to Mexico in the 16th century when the Vatican tried to retrieve its treasures from the Merida Cathedral and other churches that were being attacked by natives because the Vatican and the Spaniards had stolen all of their wealth and put it into their churches, and they wanted to protect the wealth from the Spanish, from the Spanish king.
Mm-hmm.
So they loaded it all on ships and headed for Cuba, during which they were attacked by pirates. And so they didn't make it to Havana, but they stopped in the eastern part of Cuba, which was Pinar del Rio, Guanacabibes, and they secreted the treasures, and they were enormous, gold and huge amounts of gold and jewelry and jeweled crosses and so on, secreted in a cave in Guanacabibes. Okay? And there were local natives who were apprised of the situation, and the few survivors from the pirate attack had made it ashore in Cuba. So that was back in the 16th century. The Vatican was interested in finding those treasures and returning them to Rome. The Cuban government was interested in finding those treasures because of the great wealth that they contained. Okay, so they apparently found a cave, and the military, and they tried to blow it up and reduce the roof of the cave to rubble and block their own entrance. So back to our story. Mm-hmm. One of our sons, born in Ukraine, one of Polina's sons, is a scientist and an inventor in fiber optic sensors. And the Cuban military had some idea that these sensors would help them locate the treasure. Okay, so they wanted to do a joint venture with us. In the meantime, they decided that we could look for treasure ships rather, with this new technology, these sensors. And if we were successful, we could go after the caves.
Paul, do you mind if
crazier.
Paul, do you mind if I interrupt you real quick and just ask you, what kind of sensors were you using, and what year was this?
This was the late 1980s, and the story about the sensors didn't make any sense because the sensors were used in defense perimeters and oil pipelines and things like that, right? So they would be useless in what they had proposed. But anyway, we thought the advantage of since Cuba had the largest graveyard of pirate ships loaded with pirate and Spanish ships and Portuguese ships loaded with treasures, we thought this would be an interesting venture.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, the story of the treasures. So this remarkable story of the Vatican treasures. The Vatican, by the way, sends a representative to us to try and get our cooperation in finding these treasures. But the story is recounted by Paulina in a book she wrote and published called Dog Days in Cuba, starring our Cuban Doberman. And it's a fictional account based on true events. Become a bestseller in Florida, by the way, among the Cuban expats. So we spent 3 years negotiating an agreement with the Cubans. We finally got one to explore the deep ocean for the lost treasure ships, which are many in the territorial waters, and we got an ROV from a New Zealand nature video company, and we got a ship from Cuba, and the ship had an interesting provenance because it was owned by Thor Heyerdahl.
No way.
Of Kentucky fame, the great explorer.
Wow.
And he gifted it to Castro. And so the Cuban government gave us the ship, and we retrofitted it at considerable expense with all the technology necessary to stabilize it and to run the ROV and so on. So that's how the venture got started. So we were looking for these ships. By the way, we did find the USS Battleship Maine, which launched the American-Spanish Civil War. Remember the Maine, the Hell with Spain?
Yeah.
That was a big event and launched the United States on its imperial land grab. But we found the ship had drifted from its original. The ship had blown up in Havana Harbor, and it was wrongly attributed to the Spaniards. In fact, it turned out to be a faulty design. That the coal dust, the coal storage was next to the munitions, and the coal dust has a tendency to explode. And a commission in 1974 determined that it was a faulty design. But anyway, we found the Maine, and we organized an international conference, a U.S.-Cuban conference at Florida International University, to declare the site a national memorial, an international memorial, and that was a rarer instance in which U.S. and Cuban envoys agreed on anything. So back to the treasure hunting, we did looking for ships. We came across a remarkable find from our side-scan sonar, which produced images of very large structures in the ocean deep, around 2,200 feet. And these structures were hundreds of feet in dimensions. And we couldn't figure out what it was. We had, the technology we had was more than 25 years old, and the improvements over the last several decades have been absolutely enormous. Our son, for example, drew up wreckage loot from 2,100 feet in the Atlantic Ocean. So that gives you an idea of the changes in technology. But at the time, this megalithic structure was in the Gulf Stream, and there was a lot of backscatter from the strong currents. And so it was difficult to get cameras, to get the camera images down there. Anyway, we couldn't figure out what it was. And one day we were sitting at our home outside of on the beach, outside of Havana, and we had a calendar on the wall, a Mayan calendar. And this calendar had mainly images of ancient structures, pyramids and temples of the Mayan and Aztec parts of Yucatan and Mexico. And we suddenly realized that the images, the side scan sonar images, were quite similar to these pyramids and ancient religious structures. So that, of course, was speculation. But there was something interesting about this site in the Yucatan Channel off the coast of Guadalquivir and Bernardo Rio. And that was that it was a communication dead zone, which meant that radios, all communications went dead in that area, including, it was also geomagnetically dead. Satellites didn't work, compasses didn't work. And
all around the site. All around that site.
All around that site. And by the way, this is recorded on all marine maps of the area. So we were, it was quite astonishing. And Cuban thought it could be uranium deposits, but no one knows what it was. Now, this megalithic site, by the way, we had a consulting geologist and paleontologist with us, Dr. Manuel Iturralde, who is a very celebrated Cuban and Caribbean scientist, who has discovered that Cuba has drowned and risen again at least 3 times in its geological history. And the site, this megalithic site that we found, lies at the base of an extinct volcano. So this is a seismic zone, and in all probability, it was a landmass that collapsed due to volcanic activity many thousands of years ago. The Mayans have a legend that there existed an island off the coast of Cuba that was peopled by very tall humans of an advanced culture who were responsible for bringing advanced culture to Central America. And that talking about advanced agriculture, architecture, astronomy, education, many advanced, and you have to always wonder how the ancient civilizations suddenly developed such advanced culture from a very primitive level in their architecture and astronomy and agriculture and so on. So that's just an interesting sideline, and it was explored in an article in a book actually called Atlantic Coup by a University of Syracuse professor, I think named Ramirez Rodriguez.
Hey Paul, just real quick, I want to interrupt you real quick and just ask you this question. What are your thoughts on that very tall, advanced humans? What are your personal thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's quite possible. It sinks in with the stories about Atlantis. That before the final fall of Atlantis, because it happened over many thousands of years. It was a great continent according to certain histories. That culture, and that's how we got these similarities in architecture in Egypt, in Babylon, in the Aztec and Mayan cultures, and so on. That these were remnants of Atlantis. But that's a possibility, because I think all myths, as we know from Joseph Campbell, have some important truths embedded in them. Our geologist, our consulting geologist, Dr. Ezeraldi, felt that it could be part of a land line, a land link between Cuba and Mexico, because the small evidence we had of actual structure, physical evidence, suggested granite, and since Cuba is almost all limestone, and granite is endemic to Mexico, that might explain it. There was a tremendous amount of interest at the time, in the early 2000s, of our finds, and journalists came from all over the world, and especially Western press and Reuters and BBC and National Geographic wanted to do a joint venture with us, and a lot of famous deep ocean scientists were there with us, and now there are over 2 million references on the internet on our work, because the interest in Atlantis has always been huge especially since the 19th century, and on internet searches is up there with God. So because people understand that given the tremendous shifts in plate tectonics and geophysical changes on our planet, that it's and most of the volcanoes, by the way, are on the ocean bottom. That it's quite conceivable that great civilizations of the past existed and disappeared through climate change or of one kind or another. So that was partly attracted a lot of public attention. But our expenses were running low, and we were using manned subs by 2004. We had relocated to Mexico, our base in Mexico, and we were using manned subs, and one of them lost power and became a near-death experience. And,
oh my gosh.
And that sort of terminated our adventure. In the meantime, Cuba had decided they had a tremendous oil wealth in our area, had hired a Venezuelan petroleum company to explore there, and sent us packing, and didn't renew our agreement. So that's how it ended. In the meantime, the Russians are back in Cuba in full force with their huge intelligence gathering and military installations, and the American government chooses to keep very quiet about it for very important reasons, and I'll tell you why. Because as Polina has written in her memoir, "The Sea is Only Knee Deep," that Kissinger was very quiet, that the U.S. knew about the nuclear subs in Cienfuegos in the early 70s, and was very quiet about it.
Why do you think that is?
There was a reason for it. You know, there's a lot of talk today about the assassination of JFK, and the CIA was responsible, and it's all going to be uncovered and so on. But there's a much more obvious truth about it, and I discovered this when I discovered a documentary made by a German documentary company about the assassination, and it was absolutely remarkable. It's disappeared from the internet for reasons that only the CIA will know. But it's based on a book which is still available, and what happened is that there were over 600 attempts by the CIA on Castro's life.
600.
Wow.
Yeah, since the revolution, since '59. Okay, and of course, JFK and his brother RFK were deeply implicated, and RFK was particularly zealous about getting rid of Castro, and he had a group of Cuban intelligence people working for him. What he didn't know is that they were double agents, and Fidel knew everything that was going on. And Fidel gave warnings to JFK and to RFK that if they didn't desist from their efforts to destabilize him and his government, there would be very serious consequences. And there were serious consequences. The assassination was organized by Cuban intelligence under cover of Mexican intelligence. And the whole thing was known by General Alexander Haig, the Secretary of State. And he spoke to the camera in this documentary and explained exactly what happened. And this joint work between Mexico and Cuba. He knew everything. And when he went to the Johnson government after the assassination and told them what he knew, he was advised to keep his mouth shut.
I bet.
And he said this in front of a camera. And he said that if the American people had ever learned that the assassination, and don't forget this was after the Bay of Pigs,
right?
Stupidly organized by the CIA. If the American people had ever learned that the assassination had taken place under a democratic government, and then the investigation hidden by a democratic government, that democratic government would never get back in power for a generation.
Yeah.
So this was a political decision to hide the results completely. And by the way, RFK was murdered by a Palestinian who was trained in Cuba. And Polina, in her memoir, explains what was going on in the late 60s in Cuba, and all these Palestinians who were being trained as guerrilla fighters and living in the Hotel National where she was living. It's all she exposed it. She exposed it all. So RFK was also a victim of the same Cuban blowback. So that's what really happened, and that was the reason for the cover-up. It was a political decision to save the
So when you're doing this research, there's all this, the politics are happening all around you. How is this affecting the research when you're, how many, by the way, I've only seen the one image. I mean, the one image. What other images are there of this city, of these structures? Are there?
The megalithic. Well, okay, I'm glad you asked that question, because there are many images on the internet, and they're practically all false. They were posted there by wannabes, and the Atlantean groupies. They're not true at all.
Paul, before you go further, can I first ask you if you have any pictures you could share with us that we could actually use, that we would actually have access to, that we could share with people?
Well, we did have a lot of stuff, but it was sent. All of the videos were sent by FedEx to a documentary company in the U.S. and lost. Believe it or not.
They weren't lost.
They were stolen.
Or they were stolen, possibly, yeah.
But
possibly,
so you have no
disappeared.
There's no copies.
No, we don't have. The Cubans have. There's only side scan sonar. It's not going to tell you anything.
So of the pictures on the internet, those are false.
Yeah, all the ones that show pyramids and so on. It's all nonsense.
What?
So of the let me, okay, for everyone listening, I have a lot of places I'd want to go. First thing is for the record, for your observation, can you describe not the pictures, but could you describe what was actually seen for everyone?
Yeah, they were sonar, very dark lines. They were perpendicular structures which do not appear in nature. The natures are much more haphazard and curvilinear. They were perpendicular structures, and it's probably on the internet somewhere. It's been almost 25 years, and they were on our calculations hundreds of feet in length, and very tall structures. But they're just lines. They're just sonar lines, dark sonar lines.
How many structures do you think, based on the lines?
Well, they were very large.
Like 5, 3, 10?
Yeah, it's a small number of structures. We don't know, but they were
large.
They were very, very large. Maybe just a few.
So that image,
maybe 3 or 4.
So there's this one image. If you go online, there's always a one image. It's always 3 pyramids.
Yeah, one image. Yeah, that's all it was. Yeah.
But that image is real? Is that image real, or is that image false?
Yeah. The sonar image is real. Yeah. All the other pictures are of pyramids and so stuff lying on the ocean bottom. I don't know, taken out of the Bahamas or just that's artificial intelligence.
But the image, the one image that every time, like Ancient Origins, or when you look up, or Daily Mail, when you look up, there's the sunken city off of Cuba. There's a single image that comes up. It's kind of green. It's got. Yeah,
that's the one. Yeah.
That's the real image.
That's the real image. Yeah. And as I say, we had to put 2 and 3 and 4 together in order to make speculation that came off the wall counter we had of Mayan structures, our limited access to the granite beneath the surface, and the speculation around the foot of the extinct volcano, because many ancient civilizations were built around volcanoes, including modern ones, because of the fertile ground from the lava.
Is there anyone within of the crew that went, of the people who did this work, no one else besides the Cuban government has copies of anything? There are no copies of any of the other sonar images.
Of the sonar images?
Or of the images you could grab from that structure, they've all been lost.
Well, there might be in Cuba, but many of our Cuban crew got out of Cuba.
But any of them.
And the scientist, Dr. Iturralde, has disclaimed a lot of his association with the project for political reasons.
Okay.
From the Communist Party.
So yeah, I know everyone listening. There's some people who do. We do serious research ourselves. So part of the people who are going to hear this are going to be like, is there any way to retrieve some of those images? Or there's two parts. One is anyone you can think of that we might be able to harvest in some sort of other images. And the other thing is, what's the story with going back or doing work there were you made aware of any other, three questions. Were you made aware of other sunken cities from this era, this, whatever it's hydrostatic plate shifting or whatever it is? Are there other cities you're aware of that are at that level or would have been from that time period? Or again, is there somebody else that we can harvest for the photographs? And of course, unfortunately, my last question right now would be well, why don't we just start with that? I'll shut up. I got too many questions, Paul.
Well, as I say, the technology has developed exponentially since our time in the early 2000s, in the late 1990s, and they will be able to, with much better lighting, much more accurate side scan sonar, much better cameras, they would be able to retrieve tremendous information. But good luck persuading the Cuban government or the Russians to get in there.
Paul, how old do you estimate those structures were, or are?
Below water, I guess.
Oh, yeah, the ones you discovered.
Well, they could be anywhere. I think our geologists suggested they could be at least 6,000 years old.
Not much different than Doggerland, I guess. I mean, that goes back over 6,000 to 8,000 years. It was above water, a lot of it. Yeah, it could be much more than that. I think a lot of the geological information we have is not very accurate. Right, because it would be so the number like 50,000 years wouldn't be out of the question.
It wouldn't be out of the question at all. Absolutely.
So
I think our understanding of ancient civilizations and ancient history is extremely hazy.
Yeah, Paul, I wrote on it myself. That's been my theory all along, is that there may or may not be aliens, but it appears that the megalithic structures were built by a more advanced human race in a time that we are not remembering.
Absolutely, yeah, and they disappeared. They say Lemuria disappeared by fire. That was pre-Atlantean, and Atlantis by flood. Reminds me of the African American spiritual, and God gave Noah the rainbow sign. No more water, a fire next time. I think that resonates in California these days.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, it does. So the group. Do you think that the of the Russians, I've seen a lot of. It's interesting to me from a research standpoint. The Russians were invited to Peru. They did work on Sacsayhuaman. There seems to be an effort within the Russian world of I don't know if they call it alternative science or not, or just pragmatic science, but there seems to be more of an open mind actually with Russian researchers and information about our ancient past. And I'm not sure why, but is there a group that you're aware of that are either Ukrainian or Russian or Eastern that would be more maybe able to revisit this site?
Well, it's certainly true that the Russian culture is much more open to alternative histories. It's in their nature. They're much less driven by Western orthodoxies. Now, I'm not aware of specifics. I'm sure it would be possible to easily find them on the internet. However, you have to understand that we're at a very strategic and dangerous moment in global geopolitics, and the Russians are in Cuba for very strategic and military reasons, and that everything connected with Cuba is controlled by Russia right now.
Well, we will.
This is very, very dangerous time, and I have to, for all the jokes about Trump, I have to give him credit because right now he's the only key to avoiding a third world war.
Yeah,
Believe it or not.
Yeah, so the interest in our ancient history is kind of on the side burner. Are you in your experience of at least Russian information? Do you have any thoughts on some of those Siberian 3,000-ton megaliths? Are you aware of those in Russia or the?
Yes, I'm aware of them, and Pauline is also aware of them. Yeah, I mean, I can't authenticate in the days of AI. I can't authenticate anything, but I've read references to the ancient past of Siberia, and also references to the fact that the melting of the tundra will produce some interesting evidences of a very ancient past.
The tundra in Siberia?
That's the permafrost. The permafrost is melting and then creating a huge change in global climate, because it's producing a huge amount of methane. About a quarter of the world's fossil fuels are stored up there in the north, and so much of the methane. And by the way, about huge amounts of methane also stored in the ocean bottom, which is warming up and releasing huge amounts of methane. And this is something scientists are not even talking about.
Yeah.
So you can forget about stopping climate change.
Well, the Ural Mountains were also home to where they found those gold nano screws that are always on the internet. Are you aware of those?
Yeah, I've seen some reference to that. Yeah, I think there are a lot of interesting small discoveries in Russia, which after all, it's 11 time zones. It's not a small country. It's the biggest one in the world, and it's from north to south, from east to west. So I think you're on track, certainly with regard to Siberia and related areas.
Well, are you guys friends with anyone who does any research in those areas? Do you communicate with anyone that?
No. I'm Polina right now is having a difficult time with her home country of Ukraine.
Yeah.
So she's minding a store right now.
Right.
And no, I don't right now. We follow the spiritual, some of the spiritual postings from Russia, but not so much the archaeological.
Well, I had to ask, but when it comes to that city, or what the structures are that you found, did you have any pushback from the church, from the Holy See? Was there anything that you said you had a lot of world contact, a lot of people interested on the reporting side of it, but did you have any contact from academia that said stop looking, or what are you doing, or why you're bringing this up, or did you have any negative?
Oh, well, yeah, sure. There are lots of postings on the internet. I mean, we left the project around 2004, but there are lots of postings on the internet. First of all, there are lots of phony claims. There was a book published around in the early 2000 by a prominent British researcher that traced historical Atlantis to Cuba, but I wouldn't put too much store in it. But anyway, it certainly attracted a lot of attention. The Vatican was only interested in the treasures, and there were quite a few academic disclaimers on the internet who exaggerated our findings and then poo-pooed them,
Yeah. Did you find it amusing or annoying, or didn't care?
No, I didn't care. No, I don't. I tell you, we've been through so many life histories, my wife and I, in very few years, that I'm much more concerned with current geopolitics because of the very very dangerous place the planet is in right now. So I'm following that very closely and keeping tabs on it.
Yeah, it is a great interest. We can come up for air anytime you want, and we can just like talk about politics for a minute too, just so you know. But at the same time, one of my interests isn't just historical or Christie's, not just speaking alone here, but I think part of human consciousness is connected to not only remembering our past, but there's something off about our biogenetics, our second sight, paranormal stuff, the things that we credit to maybe different religious mysticisms or whatever. And it seems like we had a society that was once much more engineered and aware of the frequencies and energies of the planet, and not in a woo-woo way, but in a very pragmatic, practical application and more synergistic way. It seems like we weren't just building large megalithic block structures, but we're also building natural energy systems. And it just all seems like it's all connected. If we knew a little more about the past, maybe we could continue with some of these exercises we're doing now, and it might be human consciousness might be not unconscious, but we might be more conscious. So part of our passion is to look at the past, truly the ancient past. Michael Cremo, I don't know if you're familiar with him or not.
I don't think so.
Oh,
I don't think so.
He wrote Forbidden Archaeology, which is a 7-year project to relocate paleoanthropological finds of human beings and anatomically correct human bones being found back tens of millions of years. And
by the way, we did find a huge human bone in one cave.
Which one?
In Cuba.
You never said that. You said that you were going to do. I forgot about this. You said that you were going to do the underwater work, and then they were going to give you access to the cave. So what happened? You do the underwater work.
Eventually, the military managed to secure the treasure, and the Cuban military returned it to the Vatican, and the Vatican was allowed to open up some of its churches in Cuba, and some backroom deals were made between Rome and Cuba.
Well, okay, so the treasures. So you ended up finding, or how many caves did you explore?
Oh, this is. We didn't. We didn't explore the caves because we didn't have. The Cuban military eventually did the job.
Where was the
I just mentioned that in the light of what you just said
okay.
about human bones. There was a human bone, a large human bones. By the way, you know those great statues in Afghanistan that were destroyed by the Taliban?
Yes, I remember.
Yeah, you know what they represent.
No.
They represent the various. They're not Buddhist statues. They were constructed by Buddhists, and they represent, I think, 7 stages of the physical stature of human inhabitants, from 175 feet down to about 25 feet in the Atlantis period. That's what they represent. That's in Blavatsky's works.
How do they? Yeah, I guess we'd have to read the works to understand the justification for it, right? I guess it's.
Oh yeah, that's right. I mean, there's not much left of the ancient past, but there are obviously a lot of remarkable things. And what you said, you know, the human history is a series of spiritual races that have developed various spiritual powers and intellectual powers within the human being. So go back to Lemuria, the third so-called third spiritual race, this pre-Atlantean, and their clairvoyance was highly developed, but not their intellect. In Atlantis, they had very advanced technology and very cruel governments, corrupt and cruel governments, not dissimilar from our own, and but also some advanced clairvoyance. The fifth race, which was mostly developed in Britain and Europe and the West, has highly developed intellect, but not much spirit. And the sixth race, which is being born now, and you can sense the remarkable change in consciousness that's happened in the 20th century.
It's remarkable, and I think
and the 21st century, you know, about which your podcast is not deaf. Excuse me, right? And the sixth race will bring the spiritual and intellectual. Will blend these powers together, and so it's an extremely important development in terms of synthesis of heart and mind and spirit, and we see this. I mentioned this, by the way, in a small monograph I published based on a lecture I gave at Queen's University of moving away from specialization.
Paul, let me ask you, what's the, so I agree with you that there is a shift on the planet in consciousness that we can, that people, I don't think everybody is aware of it, obviously, but many of us that are sensitive, I think, to ourselves and our level of consciousness can feel the shift on the planet. What happens with the seventh the seventh race? If we are the sixth, what is the seventh?
Probably on another planet. It's probably on another planet because there are planets that are made. By the way, you used the word sensitive, and this is a very important concept because you see how much coarseness there is in the world in terms of cruelty and war and ideas of revenge and killing and so on. It's in our culture, it's in behavior and so on. So the idea of sensitivity is a key to understanding the sixth race, along, of course, with breadth and depth of consciousness. So the seventh would be there are always planets. You see, Musk is not an idiot. He's just spent too much time with science fiction. He grew up with it, and his idea of that the Earth is in big trouble, and we're going to Mars is of course a dumb idea because Mars is a dead planet, and nobody's going to survive there. Same with the Moon. But the idea that there is a future planet that is prepared is not wrong. Only it's not in our field of vision right now.
So Paul, I'm sorry. Do you go ahead? So Paul, do you for those that are listening, do you have any advice for how to raise our consciousness, or do you what types of practices do you participate in?
Well, I was a student of theosophy. In fact, I ran a class in theosophy in Vancouver Island for a number of years. I was searching. You know, I tell you, I went to. I was teaching university, and I thought, you know, this is a life of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and it's not going to endure my future. So I'll tell you what happened to me. Okay, is that a good idea?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So I was I walked away from a tenure track position as a university professor because I thought this is too much of a monastery and it's too close for me. So I went to work. I took a job as a volunteer in Nigeria to work on a community mental health project with CUSO, which is similar to the American overseas volunteer work, you know, and not USAID. Okay, I have to stay away from that these days. So I went, and just before I left for West Africa, I went to the University of Toronto to hear a talk given by Baba Ramdas, Richard Halpern. You're familiar with him?
Yes.
Okay, and I was very impressed with his talk. It seems to me that he was basically talking against drugs and talking about the human spirit and where one's strength and power really comes from. And I was very impressed. And I felt that he had been to India, he had found a guru, and it had changed his life. He stopped promoting drugs and started promoting a different way of life. And I was very impressed with that, and that stuck in my mind. So after I was working in West Africa for a while on this project, and realized it was a charade and getting dumb money from Rockefeller and Ford foundations for a project that wasn't serious, which I won't go into right now, I decided to look for a teacher. So I went to India, overland, a long journey, and went looking, and I didn't find one. I came home and started my search, and I eventually I found a teacher. I found a teaching. I searched many different teachings, spiritual teachings, and I found a teacher. Actually, I met my teacher around the corner from where I was born, which is quite ironic considering I went all around the world looking for him.
The universe has a funny way, doesn't it?
Yes, the universe has a funny way of teaching us something. And he was enormously enlightened man from New York, upstate New York, and highly cultured. And I studied with him and his teaching, and that changed my whole life and changed my direction in life. So we have to. There are so many. By the way, I have the television. I have about over 30 videos, clips from my book and my television series on the internet. If you Google Paul Weinzweig videos, you will find them. But we're all born into a very complex and I would say dangerous culture, full of layers. We're brought up and we have to peel back like an onion. We have to peel back all these layers of socialization and education and indoctrination and propaganda and find out who we really are. And we've all had countless past lives, and we will all have future lives. But one thing is forever, and that is the human spirit and the experiences which are gathered around that spirit, which is called the soul, the human soul, and that is immortal. And if we understand that, we will spend less time worshiping the physical glories of life, the luxuries and the comforts of life, and the distractions of life, and more time getting serious about what life is about and where it is designed by a higher power to be heading.
Paul, can I ask you how that plays into your relationship? How that's been for you and your connection with your wife?
Absolutely, yeah. I was. I divorced my first wife, who gave me a beautiful child. She had her own spiritual life and went on it. And back in 75, 76, and then I was looking for a mate, for a partner, and went down quite a few blind alleys. It's a tricky haphazard world out there.
That's a great way to word that, Paul. It's blind alleys.
Oh yeah, but I was obviously saved by fate and by karma, and had a sign of who I would meet. That's very interesting. I was walking along the street one day, years before I met Polino, and I found a playing card. And the playing card, of course, had a suit and a number. And all our playing cards are derived, our tarot cards are derived from our playing cards. The playing cards were originally a hidden cipher, astrological cipher about our lives. And this is outlined in a fantastic book, which was published many years ago, called Sacred Symbols of the Ancients, by two Harvard researchers. It's obviously given by a higher power. Sacred Symbols of the Ancients, and believe it or not, it's available free on the internet.
Oh.
So that you have to handle it carefully and use good judgment. But it's an absolutely remarkable book. So anyway, it's a book that links the playing cards, the original playing cards, with the birthdays.
Mm-hmm.
But by this playing card, I now had a date, a day, a month, not a year. So I was my daughter moved to. I was living in Toronto. My daughter moved to Ottawa to be with her mother, and she was at that age where you could really get into trouble. So I thought, preteen. So I thought I'd better move to Ottawa and give her some guidance. So I was preparing to move to Ottawa. Before I moved, I contacted an old friend. I said I had written a book about self-realization, and I was giving lectures, and I asked a friend if he said, I'm of Jewish heritage, if he knew of any synagogues where I might give some talks. So he gave me a contact. So one day, so I contacted the synagogue, and they invited me to give a talk about my book on personal power and self-realization.
What's the name of your book?
Well, it was the original book was called The 10 Commandments of Personal Power. It was published in Canada, but it's not available. But the sequel, the update of that book is called The Dreamer Whose Dream Came True. And the subtitle is Character, Consciousness, and the Roots of Creativity. The Dreamer Whose Dream Came True. It's on the internet. It's on Amazon, along with my other books. The Dreamer Whose Dream Came True. And there's an electronic version which includes all the videos we did clips of the videos we did in Russia. So I was invited to give a talk, and the occasion was a singles brunch. So now this is interesting. And at that time, Polina was living in Ottawa. She had divorced her third husband, and she was not in a good state. And she had a friend who was a translator at the UN who insisted on dragging her to this brunch. And she didn't want to go, but she dragged her anyway. Tried to cheer her up. So in my talk, I quoted the French essayist Montaigne to say that no wind favors a ship without a destined port. In other words, if you don't know where you're going, nothing is going to help you get there. So what happens if you can't even get out of the harbor.
Aww.
Which is very sweet, considering she was a manager and ports engineer. Okay, so I said, see me after class. So after class we went to an Indian restaurant, had lunch, and that was the beginning. And decided we decided we'd form a company. It didn't take long. Called Social Engineering. I was a sociologist, and she was an engineer. Of course, that's not very woke in these days, but it was perfect. It was perfect if you get an invitation from the Soviet Union to come and help them liberate them from communism. Okay, social engineering. They love that. So that's how we got started.
I love it.
You guys you got right into the business right away.
Right into the business. She was actually, it was very interesting because she was the chairman of the local. Canada had a great deal to do with the liberation of Soviet communism, but that's another story. But she was chairman of the local engineering society, and we put on a big international conference called Third Wave Engineering and Society and Development, which is try to change the way engineers work in developing countries that is more progressive and humane. So many of the embassies sent their people to the conference, and we were approached by the science attaché from the Soviet embassy afterwards, and they invited us to. Told us they were at a critical point in their development. In perestroika, they were trying to modernize, trying to westernize and liberate their country, and could we come and help them? So that's how eventually we got to the Soviet Union and Russia.
Paul, you got to back up for me for a minute and tell me how you go from meeting her at an Indian restaurant. What was the second date like? I'm getting real, Paul. You have no filter.
I don't know. I tell you what. Well, I do. The second date. Well, she had. Marrying an analog sociologist from the Woodstock generation to a no nonsense Soviet engineer from the digital world was not going to be easy. But anyway, I was trying kicking and screaming into that world. And she trained me.
Okay.
She trained you.
So that's was quite an adjustment. So in a way, I'm a child of two cultures. The technical and the humanities.
Does she agree with you on where does she fall on the whole megalithic structures underwater and around the world? Where are you guys at with it together?
Well, she's much more conservative because she has an engineering and science background, and she's certainly interested in these ancient discoveries, but she doesn't. She is very displeased with the hype that appeared on the internet and the misinformation and distortion.
Yeah, look, if you were to.
Which is.
Oh no, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, which is being posted there. That's
Well, actually, this is something I hadn't followed up, or we hadn't given some words to. What to dispel that disinformation? What would you like to say factually about what there is to know about it, or if there was some short points about what would not be the disinformation? What would be the truth of it?
Well, I think the truth of it is ancient history is under the water.
Yeah, that's true.
Very simply, and or frozen in the Siberian tundra. I mean, the world has changed. There were scientists have discovered traces of palm trees in Alaska.
Yeah.
The Antarctic was once tropical.
Yeah.
We're heading back there again.
Yeah, Greenland used to be the North Pole. I mean, we have a number of issues with tens of millions of years of human tools and evidences of anatomically correct humans. There's clearly many chapters missing.
Yeah, many chapters missing. One thing is certain, though, we're moving at a very rapid rate, and it's wrong for science and politicians to talk about average global warming, because the Arctic and the Antarctic are moving at a much faster rate, and what happens in the Arctic has a much more profound effect on the planet than anything else. It affects the jet stream, which affects storms and droughts and everything else. And certainly it affects the salinity and temperature of the ocean, the warming of the temperature. And this is very profound because it's changing the currents. The Gulf currents, for example, which warms the northern hemisphere in Europe and Britain, it's warming. Vast areas of the ocean bottom are covered in what's called gas hydrates, which is semi-crystals of methane. And on our ship in Cuba, we could see these bubbles coming out from the ocean bottom. That's all methane. And it's 1 degree between crystals and gas, 1 degree of warming. And we know about hydro vents. The Earth, the interior of the Earth is molten. It's very hot, and all that heat is coming up from the bottom, and it's coming down from the top, and that's releasing all of this methane from the ocean bottom, and it's also and in the permafrost in the north. So this is all irreversible. So when scientists talk about changing climates, forget it. This is geoengineering is out of bounds, and nature has its own way.
Paul, what do you see the future looking like in, let's say, the next 2 decades to 10? What do you see happening?
Well, I'm 82. I don't know.
Paul, there's technology around the corner. You could be there with us.
Well, I don't know. I gotta wake up every morning and say, "Whoops, another day."
Are you ready to move on to the next?
What's that?
Are you ready to move on to the next already?
Oh yeah, sure. No, I'm actually looking forward to the afterlife, because there's so much that cannot be accomplished in this life. For one thing, if you're a thinking person, thoughts don't move very far in this world.
No, a lot of thoughts just piss people off.
But thought is indestructible.
Ooh, thought is indestructible.
Thought is part of the cosmic energy. Thought is the essence of the cosmic energy.
Thought is the essence of cosmic energy.
Which the ancients called Fohat, or materia lucida, the matter of light. These are invisible properties of light, but thought is the closest we get to cosmic energy. So if we learn by expanding our consciousness, we move from a strictly closed material world into a cosmic one, and then we are on track with evolution, because evolution is cosmically oriented. It's not simply generated from within our planet. It's connected to all the other planets.
What did you say about light again?
Well, light, the light that we see, the sun,
Okay.
is a physical, or shall we say, physically apparent manifestation of the cosmic light, which is not visible, but was felt by sensitive people.
I like that.
So you've done this on. How do you reconcile your? I would like to hear the conversation between you and your wife on the pragmatics of these philosophies.
Well, that's an interesting question. That's a lesson in tolerance, I would say. That's a lesson in, because we can learn from everything. I mean, at one time I was engineering the geopolitics of the world, and the next moment I'm making dinner and lunch and breakfast for my children, our two dogs, and my wife. It doesn't matter what you do in this world, because consciousness and spirit are independent of our physical life. We can learn from everything we do, and there is nothing small and nothing big.
Nothing small and nothing big.
No, there is nothing small and nothing big. You cannot say something is small and we shouldn't bother with it, or something is too big to understand. We live in infinity. Who can understand infinity?
So on that note, Paul, just speaking to that, what do you say to people who think that are either closed-minded or think that something shouldn't be, that won't seek or become or awake or conscious or like, what happens what do you think of the people that dismiss all of it, what you just said?
Like the people, Paul, the people that are sleeping, the ones that are indoctrinated, and the ones that are, with the institution, I guess. What's the word I'm looking for, Jared?
Program.
Programs, yeah. If we're not...
Yeah, there are programs. Well, I think one has to understand that Plato's cave allegory, that if you escape from the cave and you want to bring light to humanity, you will be persecuted. Because about 85% of humanity are locked into the past, and about 15% of humanity are moving towards the future. And the history of all spiritual teachers and healers has also been a history of persecution. And you have to play your cards judiciously. And we're not in the business of persuading closed minds. I deal with this in my book, The Dreamer Whose Dream Came True, and I also deal with it in a more recent book I published, which is also on Amazon, called Socrates at the Last Chance Saloon. And it was the book was inspired inspired, if that's the word, by the suicide of my nephew. And it's a meditation on suicide, which the French philosopher Camus said is the only serious question in life: why live? And in this little book, it's a monograph really, it's an allegory on the disenchantment of the world. And Socrates comes back, and he's given a mission to correct the impression he left with his own suicide 2,500 years ago, and the great disappointment he gave to his students, who begged him not to leave, because he had a choice. He could have exiled himself, but he chose suicide. He was stubborn. So he sets up shop in a saloon, in a bar, where he tries to open the consciousness of people, and it's a somewhat humorous, somewhat tragic story of his efforts to do that, and called Socrates at the Last Chance Saloon. It kind of demonstrates the how easy it is. I think my nephew ultimately committed suicide over a failure of a romantic relationship. That was just a trigger. There were deeper issues there, but how easy it is for humans to become distracted, to be destabilized, especially at this time in our extremely chaotic world. And attention deficit disorder goes very deep. I said blaming TikTok, but just look at 75 years of television, 65 years of music videos, and there's a lot to blame. But it is we're certainly at a tipping point, both climactically and spiritually of the planet. An enormous tipping point where it has never been easier to be lost and to drown, and it has never been easier to leap forward
and to be found.
So,
Paul,
do what people like you are doing.
What is your advice to the people who are awake, to the seekers in the world, and the people, like Jared and I, doing what we're doing and talking to people like you that are open-minded like us? What is your advice to the people coming up behind you, the seekers, following after you?
Well, I think one needs to discover balance in this extremely chaotic world. One needs a great deal of courage because there's it is hard to be open to the world and to be exposed to a time of terrible destruction. I mean, you talk about sensitive people. This is terrible for sensitive people, and sensitive people will pay a high price for this time that they live in. It is very hard for sensitive people. Absolutely terrible for them, and really our heart has to go out for them, because there will be many victims who are collateral damage in an old world that is dying and a new world that is being born. So I would say, number one, find your balance, find your equilibrium, find an outlet for your energy, and because there are enormous energies coming into the planet, and And at the same time, there are enormous chaos in the energy surrounding the planet, which are a result of human thinking and human actions. And I would say that it is so important to have stability. Stability comes from a sense of responsibility. The terrible thing that's happening to young people, they have no sense. They're left adrift. They have no connection with a responsible life. The old days, they worked on farms, and in Africa, they're 6 years old. You're mining lithium for Western companies. But to have a sense of responsibility and to have an outlet for your energy, whether it's your work, your hobby, I have my. I'm grateful I have my family to look after and shopping and meals to cook. These are all small but necessary aspects of life, and they should not be denigrated.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much to say. Would you be? I don't know. I feel like we've covered a lot of different spectrum of everything that you and I and all of us, we're interested in. Would you talk to us again sometime?
I'd be happy to.
Oh, thank you.
I'd be happy to. It's not often we meet kindred spirits, and we have to maximize it.
Let's flame that fire.
Yeah, the collective consciousness is what's important.
The collective fire. That's right.
Okay.
No, I tell you, I spend time every day on the internet, YouTube's on YouTube on the alternate media, which I find extremely informative and educative.
Yeah.
So we have to say that the technological inventions that have given us. By the way, the internet came out of the Pentagon, so you never know who's going to give birth to something useful. But the internet and podcasts and YouTube and so on have given us enormous access to alternative media and alternative consciousness.
That's right.
To which we have to be very grateful.
Yeah, very much so. We can't thank you enough for your time for this interview.
My pleasure.
And we are really looking forward to speaking with you again sometime, Paul.
Sure. Anytime. Can you send me some information about your podcast?
Absolutely. In fact, you know what we're going to do is we're going to wrap up the recording and we're going to hit pause on that, and then we can do all that. So is there anything else?
Okay.
Words? Anything else you want to say for the listening audience? You get the last word.
Well, it's important not to close the heart off, because the heart is the closest we get to God.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
We're gonna pause on that. We're gonna period it on that, and then we'll just keep talking here in a second. The backstory.
Yeah. Let's start.
But he chose suicide. He was stubborn. So he sets up shop in a saloon, in a bar, where he tries to open the consciousness of people, and it's a somewhat humorous, somewhat tragic story. pursue that. And called Socrates at the Last Chance Saloon. And it kind of demonstrates the how easy it is. I think my nephew ultimately committed suicide over a failure of a romantic relationship. That was just a trigger. There were deeper issues there. But how easy it is for humans to become distracted, to be destabilized, especially at this time in our extremely chaotic world. And, attention deficit disorder goes very deep. I said blaming TikTok, but, just look at 75 years of television, 65 years of music videos, and there's a lot to blame. But it is we're certainly at a tipping point, both climactically and spiritually of the planet, an enormous tipping point, where it has never been easier to be lost and to drown, and it has never been easier to leap forward
and to be found.
So,
Paul,
do what people like you are doing.
What is your advice to the people who are awake, to the seekers in the world, and the people, like Jared and I doing what we're doing and talking to people like you that are open-minded like us? What is your advice to the people coming up behind you, the seekers, following after you?
Well, I think one needs to discover balance in this extremely chaotic world. One needs a great deal of courage because there's it is hard to be open to the world and to be exposed to a time of terrible destruction. I mean, you talk about sensitive people. This is terrible for sensitive people, and sensitive people will pay a high price for this time that they live in. It is very hard for sensitive people. Absolutely terrible for them, and really our heart has to go out for them because there will be many victims who are collateral damage in an old world that is dying and a new world that is being born. So I would say, number one, find your balance, find your equilibrium, find an outlet for your energy, and because there are enormous energies coming into the planet, and at the same time there are enormous chaos in the energies surrounding the planet, which are a result of human thinking and human actions. And I would say that it is so important to have stability. Stability comes from a sense of responsibility. The terrible thing that's happening to young people, they have no sense. They're left adrift. They have no connection with a responsible life. In the old days, they worked on farms, and in Africa, they're 6 years old. You're mining lithium for Western companies. But to have a sense of responsibility and to have an outlet for your energy, whether it's your work, your hobby, I have my. I'm grateful I have my family to look after and shopping and meals to cook. These are all small but necessary aspects of life, and they should not be denigrated.
There's so much to say would you be, I don't know, I feel like we've covered a lot of different spectrum of everything that you and I and all of us, we're interested in. Would you talk to us again sometime?
I'd be happy to.
Oh, thank you.
I'd be happy to. It's not often we meet kindred spirits, and we have to maximize it.
Let's flame that fire.
Yeah, the collective consciousness is what's important.
The collective fire. That's right.
Okay.
No, I tell you, I spend time every day on the internet, YouTube's on YouTube on the alternate media, which I find extremely informative and educative.
Yeah.
So we have to say that the technological inventions that have given us. By the way, the internet came out of the Pentagon, so you never know who's going to give birth to something useful. But the internet and podcasts and YouTube and so on have given us enormous access to alternative media and alternative consciousness.
That's right.
To which we have to be very grateful.
Yeah, very much so.
Absolutely.
We can't thank you enough for your time for this interview.
My pleasure.
And we are really looking forward to speaking with you again sometime, Paul.
Sure. Anytime. Can you send me some information about your podcast?
Absolutely. In fact, you know what we're going to do is we're going to wrap up the recording and we're going to hit pause on that, and then we can do all that. So is there anything else?
Okay.
Words? Anything else you want to say for the listening audience? You get the last word.
Well, it's important not to close the heart off, because the heart is the closest we get to God.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
We're gonna pause on that. We're gonna period it on that, and then we'll just keep talking here in a second.
On YouTube, on the alternate media of life, and they should not be denigrated.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's so much to say. Would you be? I don't know. I feel like we've covered a lot of different spectrum of everything that you and I and all of us, we're interested in. Would you talk to us again sometime?
I'd be happy to.
Oh, thank you.
I'd be happy to. It's not often we meet kindred spirits, and we have to maximize it.
Let's flame that fire.
Yeah, the collective consciousness is what's important.
The collective fire. That's right.
Okay.
No, I tell you, I spend time every day on the internet, YouTube's on YouTube on the alternate media, which I find extremely informative and educative.
Yeah.
So we have to say that the technological inventions that have given us. By the way, the internet came out of the Pentagon, so you never know who's going to give birth to something useful. But the internet and podcasts and YouTube and so on have given us enormous access to alternative media and alternative consciousness.
That's right.
To which we have to be very grateful.
Yeah, very much so. We can't thank you enough for your time for this interview.
My pleasure.
And we are really looking forward to speaking with you again sometime, Paul.
Sure. Anytime. Can you send me some information about your podcast?
Absolutely. In fact, you know what we're going to do is we're going to wrap up the recording and we're going to hit pause on that, and then we can do all that. So is there anything else?
Okay.
Words? Anything else you want to say for the listening audience? You get the last word.
Well, it's important not to close the heart off, because the heart is the closest we get to God.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
We're gonna pause on that. We're gonna period it on that, and then we'll just keep talking here in a second.